This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, this Honourable Chamber was in Standing Finance Committee. We resume thus.
Standing Finance Committee resumes with Head 82. We were finishing up with the Honourable Minister for St. Lucie. Your final question.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Most welcome.
My second question was in relation to the National Conservation Commission and the beautification work that they have been doing. What are the plans going forward? They have done some excellent work, I've seen for sure in St. Lucie, particularly in the environs of the St. Lucie's Parish Church and also at River Bay. So I want to know what are the other plans for the rest of Barbados, basically.
Good afternoon, Minister. The beautification program that we have in place, as you would know, we started in St. Lucie with the regathering beautification. But beautification at the NCC, our program is a continuous beautification program in every community, every roadway around the island. We have several teams throughout the island, and the beautification is not only at the parks and open spaces, but the beaches as well, which we have a great responsibility in maintaining the cleanliness of the beach, the safety at the beach, security at the beach. So our beautification program, it runs the length and breadth of the island. From River Bay, which you have seen, where we have transformed for the regathering, and we still have to continue with the program in cleaning up River Bay, with the sargassum, influx of the sargassum there. The facility still needs to be maintained on a daily basis. The area around the church, which we created, we have to maintain that. We continue with the cleanup program, not only in debushing or clearing lots, but we have a talented group of persons who express their artistic and their creative acumen by presenting along the roadways, along the community gardens, along the botanical gardens, wherever. We have these persons creating new spaces for entertainment, new spaces for recreation, relaxation, just for people to utilize. These are within each and every community. We have the regathering locations that we ensure that are prepared well in advance of the regathering events. And after the regathering events, we continue to maintain these spaces because Barbadians need a place to, outside of their homes and yards, to go into the communities and other persons' communities so that they can fellowship, they can have a beverage, and they can speak and talk about the wondrous things that they have known or seen. And that is one of the roles of the NCC. We don't just clear bush and rake garbage. We create spaces for people. And we will continue to do that in every small crevice and space within Barbados. Now, we have in the past just cut grass, clear a few areas, and put one or two flowers. I know my staff, we can do a lot more. We will do a lot more. And they have expressed themselves within the confines of the botanical gardens. And I have challenged them, go beyond. We will go to every community, to every open space, to every beach. And we will look to transform this Barbados into a place that is reveled by all. We have a great task at hand. I know that. We have few resources. But I've seen even in the cleanup Barbados, the 360 contract workers, they have an energy. They have an effervescence in them that they want to do more. And they know that we can do more and we will do more.
Go ahead with your fourth.
I would also like to say that the NCC, we're going to try to motivate people to participate. We intend to work not only within the agency, but also with NGOs across the entire country and individuals. We're going to have competitions within the areas across Barbados. Probably we would discuss if we're going to call it a community beautification program, some kind of competition, or I may even copy a model that I saw, which might be even the Prime Minister's Best Village, and apply the concept in a meaningful way in the various communities across Barbados and get people to understand the importance of not only cleaning up the environment itself, but also bringing those aesthetical values that will make people feel a lot lighter within the environment in which they live and make them feel that they're living in a haven that is conducive to good human upliftment. We have to do things, social things, through the ministry itself, without encroaching on or working in collaboration with other ministries, because I strongly believe that when communities look depressed, even if they are not depressed, they will become depressed. And I have to find ways of feeling that it's not an ugly environment, so they don't have to do things that are conducive to an ugly environment itself. So we want to do things inside the community that are relatively wholesome and give an uplifting to the spirit of the people. Then I believe that what we've witnessed over the years that we need to capture, and this is a discussion that I intend to have with the Minister of Culture as well, is that I have seen a lot of talent that is an innate feature of working class communities. Untrained men who never studied art or even draw a line in the school system produce the most creative art across Barbados. Members of the Rastafarian community. What makes the creative imagination within that fraternity so great? I've seen wall art across Barbados. If you talk to them, they never know, what is it, fellow, Bob, the artist Bob, they never knew Boothagen, they never know Bridge Clark, they never know some of the well-known fine art personalities in Barbados. But these people produce material that are very impactful and soothing to people when they move through the individual communities in Barbados. And we want to give a sense of importance to the beautification, right? Not only doing gardens, by playing up in mold and planting plants, but I've seen, in recent times, I've seen a young man who took, what do you call it, mulch in different colors, and he actually designed gardens with a logo that reflects the Commonwealth logo, the CARICOM, the future, the Commonwealth, and the CARICOM logos. And we have also seen him mirror aspects of the Barbados. Well, we didn't go ahead with that. Yeah, but I've seen him done a lot of work that I think is interesting. I want to be able to introduce into the gardens, and in general, not only the botanical gardens, but other gardens as well. I think Bannister who deceased, Bannister left, there's a legacy of iron art of great significance. We have had discussions with the Bannister family, and they're quite willing to work with us and allow the NCC, between the NCC and the Botanical Gardens to have that art on the basis of some kind of license to do so. So it would be of no cost to us. All that we have to do is to agree to the conditions that would allow them to come and inspect and make sure that we keep it in good order. That is something that we intend to do. So to some extent, there's a lot of work to be done by Mr. Als and the people in that particular that agency of the government, in the NCC, as part of the Ministry of the Environment. I will also, what we're actually doing as well, we set about major targets at the NCC in producing the required. We have the seeds. We try to produce as much growth inside the nursery. We're going to have 600,000 seeds, about 600,000 seeds, in which we believe that the success rate will be way over 500, or even the 600,000 plants. We don't anticipate any major failure. We would probably keep enlightening you on the strategies that we're going to use to ensure that the failure rate don't increase in any way at this time.
You speak about national beautification for the living, but I'm interested as well in national beautification for the dead. We have a graveyard in Bushy Park. I would love to know the plans for that. The chapel no longer exists for use. Are there plans to make the graveyard beautiful as well? I know it's under them.
The reality is that the rigidity that exists between departments, we don't intend to continue with that approach. There's a very, through the meeting of the different departments in the ministry itself, we understand that there are, in fact, even what we might call overlapping concerns. We don't use the word in the sense that we see it as a duplication, and therefore it should not obtain. The reality is that as long as there's human existence, from time to time there's going to be an overlapping in many different areas. Somebody will concentrate on housing for the disabled. Some people will concentrate on housing for the able. The designers who design the houses for the disabled should understand that there's special provisions that might be put there. I'm just using that as an example. So you don't expect to build a house with 17 stairs for a man that don't have legs to get up to the top. So you obviously can build that for an able-bodied man, but that'll be healthy exercise for him. But a man that don't have legs, we have to look to see how we can construct rooms to the bottom of a house in order to facilitate him. I'm saying that because from time to time, what is happening in one government department or what is happening in another government department or ministry might look like if it is the same thing, but there's a fundamental aspect of that program that makes it completely different to the other department. But when people do not spend enough time looking to see what are the differences, then you believe that you're duplicating. But out of different concerns, sometimes people address how do we find a way of creating a habitat for people that face certain conditions in life. So in a disabled home, you have to have the appliances, for example, that you don't have to have. You have to have a stove of a certain height. You have to be extremely cautious. Sometimes in those homes, you might have to have more fire extinguishers, or you might even have to have toilet facilities that are wider so that the body can go with a wheelchair. So all I'm saying to you is that while the sanitation is responsible for the cemeteries across Barbados, the beautification program which we have within the NCC, we will also work in collaboration, right? Or the SSA could speak to us within the ministry, and when the SSA cannot respond to the demand immediately, NCC is quite willing to work with them in order to carry out the required service to make everybody happy.
So in summary, there are plans? Thank you.
We are not only plans, but we are already executing those
Wonderful.
plans.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions at this moment.
Thank
but
you. Honourable Leader of the
Congratulations on your hard
Opposition.
work.
Thank you much, Madam Chair. Just 2 or 3 quick questions. I'm sure that my honorable friend will handle with very easy dispatch. Some degree of disgust has been expressed relative to what some people consider the nuisance caused by fires emanating from recycling sites, operation sites in Barbados. I don't regard it as a nuisance, and I think those who are more immediately affected see it as a serious threat to health and well-being physically, as well as to the health of the nation's economy in terms of the potential for negative impact. My question to you, Honourable Minister, and the team would be whether or not your ministry is satisfied that we have adequate legislation in place to deal with the operations of recycling sites and the threat, especially through fire and all that comes with that, emanating from these sites from time to time, as we've had experience in the past, both distant and recent past. That's one question. The second one is this. I know Honourable Minister is one of the most conscious people in the Parliament of Barbados when it comes to the ugliness of class bias and facilitated privilege in Barbados to a select group or groups. And I did hear the minister himself speak with some degree of disgust himself with respect to contractual terms entered into is it SBRC? I think that's the acronym. And further made reference to the attempts to redress that. My question really is whether or not it is the minister's view that we have a class bias also existing in the solid waste management disposal sector in Barbados, because I know he's pretty much sensitized to these things. Having spoken of the threats that emanate from recycling operations, I also would want to ask, to what extent is the government facilitating the development of recycling industries in Barbados, especially to the smaller players?
Minister, to be truthful, in any system, from time to time, we have to make
You accord to me, my honourable friend, a status which I do not endure.
Minister of the Cloth. My Conrad, Leader of the Opposition, law should always be relevant to the social challenges of the time. There are times when we apply outdated laws, and many times attorneys have been able to exploit the void in the outdated laws. When new issues emerge in relation to if we have the legal instruments to manage things, from time to time we go to Cabinet and ultimately to Parliament in order to make the necessary amendments to the laws, or we even go with a new statutory instrument in order to address the issues at hand. In some cases, we draft legislation that will allow us to have the powers of putting a penalty, either a criminal penalty or some way of addressing the particular issue through some civil form of law. As we identify, and I believe when I started the discussions today, I made the point that at different stages in our lives, there are evolutionary and revolutionary changes that would occur, and new challenges that we never thought much about would come up, and therefore we have to make the adjustments to the required legislation so that we can deal with these problems in the way that we can. I would not tell you, I couldn't say it with any honesty, that they're not requirements for amendments to legislation. In some cases, it would not be wise and prudent, even though I understand the commitment, to say where the holes are, because sometimes people exploit and abuse. Man is not that generous. Exploit those areas, knowing very well. For example, if we had a law that covers areas of narcotics or even herbal material that can be perceived as a drug, and people feel that there's no legislation to deal with it, I might be very well open up an area which could be injurious or detrimental to society in general. So therefore, I would not identify it. What I can tell you is that as things come up that we never experienced before, or we now recognize the severity of the problem, the ministry normally forward concerns to the Solicitor General, tell them what are or the DPP, but mainly the Solicitor General, tell them what are the concerns that we have, and we ask the Solicitor General to draft legislation. When you get this so far, not the Director of Public Prosecution yet, to draft the legislation, and we look at it as thoroughly as we can at the level of the Cabinet, and then that legislation comes before the House Assembly, so that things that we did not really see in the early stages, that second opportunity is made available before it goes before the House Assembly, and the law, well, it's from the lower house to the upper house to the accent of the Governor General before it becomes law. That is one aspect of it. I'm going to let Mr. Marshall answer the question in relation to recycling, and I would well asking that, I would look to see what it is that you were asking about in relation to SBRC. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon again. There has been a committee established by Cabinet, a technical committee, which I'm the chair, asked to look at the activities associated with known illegal dump sites, with activities associated with recyclers and recycling operations, as well as end-of-life quarries, with a threefold purpose. One, looking at addressing issues with illegal dump sites and identifying what needs to be done with those that have been clearly identified. The second matter relates to setting up operational procedures for existing recycling operations to ensure that they take the necessary precautions and follow the appropriate guidelines to reduce the opportunities and incidents of fires associated with those. And thirdly, to look at the rehabilitation of old quarries in a way that makes logical sense and use of the space that is there while being environmentally sound. I hope that that is explanation enough in that respect. With respect to the issue of access to opportunities for recyclers, normally they would contact the Ministry of Finance and indicate what business it is they're doing or they're seeking to do, and seek to have the necessary tax and duty exemptions as they would be requesting. If they're an established operation, normally correspondence would come from the Ministry of Finance to the Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, asking us whether or not we know of the operation and whether or not they operate in a manner in which they should before that permission is granted. And usually any new players in the industry look to come to us before they set up to discuss what the real opportunities are, to find out what the steps are that they need to take. So that is how those things normally obtain.
I would also like to extend my views on that as well, as true as the expressions, the freedom of speech that Mr. Marshall offered without any guidance from me has been. But the reality is that, yes, they obviously, some of these businesses that we have across Barbados, all the legal requirements were not really honored. But some of these, especially race brokers, have been performing a noble duty to the Barbadian public. And from time to time, purists believe that if you're what they are called legal, if you're not legal, then you should not function. I can be honest with you, and any of my officers can tell you, I am one of the strongest defenders of these operators. The legitimacy for me is that they're doing a service, a contribution to Barbados and the general public that we should applaud more so than look for loopholes in order to identify them and say that you ought not to be functioning because you're not legal. And what I've been trying to do is to make sure that I facilitate them, even in the present circumstances. I would not say that there's a class bias in it, because to be honest with you, these terms like class and race, I call a man a racist if he believes that he's superior to others. If a man believes that he has any level of class superiority, I believe that it might not be necessary color, because class is a very complex thing. I don't know if it is color sometimes. I don't know if it's social standing. What I know for sure that there are many men who acquired a lot of money, but the Barbadian public never perceived them no more than street men and grassroots men. They had over $1 million, $2 million. In some cases, some of these businessmen might be seen as wealthy men, but the reality is that based on who they are, the general public don't see them in that light. And so I can't say, because most of the times my position, which is unfortunate, my position is very favorable to those persons who stand at a disadvantaged position. And it is those people that I try to accommodate sometimes when they're making like small errors in the way in which they apply the services that they offer to the general public of Barbados. I grant you some mercy sometimes in the circumstances. So I would not say there's a bias. What I would say is that sometimes some people get a little pig-headed of a certain type, and they believe that they can make decisions which might come in conflict with the position being taken by the ministry itself. But trust me, leader of the opposition, they fall back in line very quickly. We have had situations in recent times where people who are in possession of dollars felt they could do what they do on our beaches. I am still watching closely, and I am waiting on all the material facts before I make another strong public pronouncement over the things that these people do across the landscape. So I'm not anti-businessman, but I am anti-pig-headed businessman. Anytime a businessman believes that he can bore his way through the state, it means that you're asking me to have less respect for the powers of the state. The people who control the state are the people who the people of Barbados elected, and they have a responsibility not to abuse power, and I'm not going to be supportive of anybody who thinks that they have money and therefore they can abuse power and belittle the management of the state itself. So rest assured, and you can always call on me. Don't mind the party lines, you can always call on me. And as long as I know it's a position that is just, I'm quite willing to be there for you. And at least if you feel that there's something that can be harmful to the development of Barbados, I'll rub shoulders with you on those issues.
I thank you, Honourable Minister. I know you do not observe too rigidly those party lines, and I appreciate that. With reference, therefore, just for clarity, to the people who are doing private recycling or private waste hauling, there's no level of indebtedness to them on behalf of the state at the time. We don't owe them any money, and at the same time, we did reach a point where, having renegotiated the contract with SBRL, is it? We then owed them 20 million, SBRC. We then owed them $20 million, and are we still indebted to them?
Is the chairman here? Let me ask Ms. Jones to respond to that.
Good afternoon. Currently, we are not indebted to the SBRC. At the end of March 31st, 2018, the government of Barbados owed SBRC $34 million, which has now been cleared. And government entered into a contract of SBRC in the year 2009, a 20-year contract for the processing of waste. At that time, the monthly fee was $2.2 million. In 2019, we entered into negotiations with SBRC, and that has been reduced to $1.0 million monthly.
Revisit the contract.
Yes, we had a contract addendum, and the price has been reduced. Currently, we are not indebted to anybody. With respect to the BIRD program, we are required to settle our debts monthly, so we have no arrears to anyone.
Let me.
SBRC, and we don't owe any of the smaller private waste haulers.
The position is that we are the SOEs are not allowed to carry any arrears. So all bills for January has to be settled by the end of February. February has to be settled by the end of March. So we would have just settled January's bills. February's bills are now to be settled.
And the opposition would also like to tell you, at the 10-year period, the provision in the first contract is that at the 10-year period, it was subject to review, and which we did, and which there's a memorandum of understanding was signed with them, and there was nothing contentious about the discussions which we had. I really want to thank them for that. But I said to myself, but when I see the renegotiations and everything, and I see that we were able to reduce that from $2.2 million a month to below $1 million a month, every day, I don't know what will cause a government to engage in a contract where a business can still function by receiving less than half the amount it charged before, still function and still enjoys a profit and still continue with a very happy relationship with the SSA and with the government of Barbados. There's something about that I consider not the company itself, but other persons at the government level to be suspects. And hopefully the truth will reveal itself in time.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I am mindful that my colleague, the member for St. Lucie, and also the Honourable Leader of the Opposition have visited this matter of the landfill, albeit from a very general perspective. They will forgive me, ma'am, because in the case of those people in St. James Central, and certainly in the case of he who must represent their interests in this place, it is not a general matter or a matter for general concern, but it is a matter of specific and palpable pain. Now, the history, I think, has been well articulated. We have had challenges of fires, I think 5 fires in about 2 years. The matter of the management of the landfill is a glaring issue of concern for the residents, specifically in Arch Hall and Bennett's, not only because of fires, but because of the scent of the landfill. I think people in Barbados do not understand what it is like to be at the centerpiece of the receiving end of the nation's waste, so that you wake up every morning to the scent of the nation's refuse. You go to bed every night with it wrinkling your nostrils. I hear that which the minister has said and that which his colleagues, his staff have said. But I too want to speak the language of the people who are enduring this matter. It is an interesting and hybrid challenge, because right next to Arch Hall Bennett's, and I'm going to tell the chamber the full story, is a place called Sandy Lane. And obviously I wear the cap for the time being of Minister of Tourism. The reality is that I must represent those people too. But you know, Madam Chair, they did not elect me, though albeit there are people in a district called Sandy Lane who would have elected me, but the hoteliers did not elect me. And I have to represent the rural proletariat in this matter. The lumpen class, who in my respectful view, are taken a little bit for granted in this matter. I hear the song of lamentation that tires on top of the old dump at Phase 1 have been a cause repeatedly for there to be outbursts of fire. Bushfires that catch have also been a source of the fire. I appreciate that there's a policy now of tendering for a shredder to reduce the volume. I get that. But what is missing in all of this is an understanding that, or seemingly an understanding that there's a sense of urgency that attends to those folks who have to dwell in the immediate area. Even as the fires raged most recently, the spokespersons, who I commend, come out and they speak about what is happening to control the situation. But what is not communicated to the folks that I must represent is how long. How much longer are they reasonably expected to wait before the SSA can bring a solution to this? Even today, that which I heard by way of a response to one of the questions was that the shredder issue is not a final solution, but it buys time. And I must say that it gives me a little bit of cold comfort, because for my people, that is not the most adequate of answers. So my invitation to the minister and to his team is to speak to the folks who matter most in this matter. Speak to the folks who go to bed every night in the hope that they will not once again have to spend thousands of dollars that they don't have to treat the families' complaints about asthma, to treat to the health complaints that have arisen. And I must say, it is not an overstatement, it is not being melodramatic. There are folks in Arch Hall and Bennett's who you know, blood run from your nose during the course of the last fire. These are things that people are living with. And I think the legitimate concern that they have is a public health one, environmental one, which is saying, well, look, what is the state doing to intervene in a timely manner to bring this long-standing problem to an end? I am first to accept that it did not begin with this minister or with this administration. It has a long history. But part of our challenge, unfortunately, has been that we must correct some of the ills of the past that have long existed and caused tremendous pain. In this regard, I don't wish to speak for my neighbor in St. Thomas, but I know that across from us, there are others as well in neighboring communities in St. Thomas who go through the same thing. And we do need to have, look, Madam Chair, simply put, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. I think the book of Hebrews teaches us that. We are asking these folks in Arch Hall and Bennetts and surrounding districts to live by faith and walk by faith. In matters of this type, ma'am, I think that they want to walk by sight more so than by faith. And that is the question I have for the minister. How long, Mr. Minister, is it reasonably expected that it will take for there to be a final solution to this problem?
Minister, I don't have absolute power in the government to which I belong. If I had absolute power, I will respond to your concerns immediately. So we both belong to a body of persons that the people elected to represent their interests. And we have a number of forums where we advance the policies of the government. We also prioritize what we believe we ought to do. And as far as I know, with the exception of the Prime Minister, who is primus inter pares, all of us, we have equal authority to express our concerns at the highest levels of cabinet, in the highest levels of parliament, as we do today. And what I will do, along with you, as a colleague, is join collectively and ask the other brethren and sisters within the cabinet to try to express and share a common position with you on why we believe that this government ought to make it a priority to find resolve to the problem that you have highlighted. As you indicated, prior to 2018, we were not responsible. We were if you want to say we've been responsible for the last 2 years, but we both you and I, are in the same position to be able to do the work for the people of Barbados, do the work for the people who elected us. And as you indicated, not the hotel owners, but the people from the lumpen proletariat, to which I'm sure that both of us can empathize with. And that even makes us not only being factual in our request, but makes us equally as passionate, not compassionate necessarily, but as passionate about these feelings. I might be passionate, but I will be passionate, but certainly not theatrical. I would like to believe that both of us will be passionate and compassionate in the circumstances. I give you the assurance that this minister will give you full support in trying to advance this matter before the cabinet itself. I hope that it can be prioritized in order to address the concerns of the people of Arch Hall and the peoples of Bennetts, even if you're not addressing the concerns of the management of the Sandy Lane Hotel. So that's the best that I can give. I don't think that my officers are in a position to speak on prioritizing the policies of the government. So therefore, it falls right back at the very government to which you belong.
But, ma'am, if I may ask the follow-up question, and I hear my colleague, and I thank him for his very kind sentiment, but I must go a little bit further because there are some aspects of it that do not sit entirely at the level of where we are as ministers. I just heard in this place that there is a committee which is looking at the issues of the management and rehabilitation of old quarries and disused landfills. Again, the interesting thing about St. James Central is that we have them too. I give you the example that in Hoyts Village, for example, it fell to your humble servant in opposition when one morning the folks in Hoyts Village woke up to find an incinerator had been placed without reference to anybody in the belly of the Bagatelle dump. And your humble servant then had to lead the charge to go to the court in order to secure an injunctive relief to stand between the people and those who would have wished to commercialize the Bagatelle dump by way of an incinerating plant without reference to the people who live there. This is the lived reality of the people that I am representing. And so therefore, to hear that there is a committee that is going to be looking at matters of the rehabilitation and management of these types of facilities heartens me, and I am sure my constituents on one hand. But equally, again, the question is that I am crying out now for a little bit more specificity. Where are we in the process? Again, how much longer is it realistically anticipated that there will be able to be a recommendation made on a way forward? And I'm not saying it to be difficult. I'm saying it because there is really no other way of making the case that people who are living with this on a day-by-day basis have a different understanding to it than I think anybody else in Barbados would. You know, in Bagatelle, for many years, they know what it is to wake up at night at 2 and 3 in the morning because it's a metal dump. And youngsters are going in the dump in the dead of night in order to procure the metals because it allows them to get under cover of darkness those types of materials which allow them to make their own weapons of destruction. Not policed, unsupervised. Those are the things that the folks live with. So that, again, I cannot in any way, shape, or form lay blame at the feet of you, Minister, or of your team. But I must say that once we are given the ray of hope by way of a declaration from Mr. Marshall that there is a committee, then we want to hear a little bit more about how the committee is progressing and what it is looking at. And I think I'm seeking through that same voice a level of public edification as to what the process being contemplated is.
Minister, in no way, I consider putting the matter before me one that is not of some level of sincerity. But I believe that you and I must say this to you, I believe that one of the voices that we express, especially when we are in the comfortable position of 29 now to 1, sometimes there's a thirst, there's an inner concern for solid, critical analysis of the realities that individual MPs have to face. And sometimes these issues might affect one ministry or the other, and sometimes ministers believe that you ought not to have mentioned it here. I am not of that kind, and trust me, I will answer you the way how I can best answer it in the most polite way. But I believe that we must challenge each other to do better. We must challenge each other to respond to important public concerns as the one that you mentioned. It is going to take this discussion even a little further, and probably it may help us to expedite the response that you really need. And probably if you never raised the issue here, you would not be able to get the kind of response that you really. I can understand how you feel. I know how it is. I visited the you call it Arch Hall. I went there with one of the officers from the Ministry of Health during the last fire on the landfill, and some of the residents were very militant And I asked the officer to get me out of here quick. I give him the assurance that I will do all that I can, but I didn't have the skills of the fire chief, the skills of the officers from the sanitation department or the private persons who help on the landfill. And so apart from the fire, I'm cognizant that there are emissions coming off the landfill that can be harmful, not only in terms of odor, but the gas that comes from the landfill and whatever other toxic materials that might affect the respiratory systems of people below. It is an issue that we have to apply ourselves urgently to addressing. And I would just like to say that I don't know if the Officer Marshall wants to give greater clarity than he can to the whole thing.
Thank you, Minister. We are seeking to have those guidelines put in place. We've set ourselves as a committee the goal of having those guidelines for the operation of the waste recyclers and waste brokers by the end of April. But the issue of disused quarries is a more detailed one, and there's been a working group in the committee set up to look at the different types of quarries and the potential uses and how that governance is to take place. What happens now is that you can have development of a quarry and then you're required by law to rehabilitate that quarry, but there was no existing guidance on exactly how that rehabilitation was to be done. And so we're trying to work on that now, but that is one that is affected by the type of quarry that you're talking about, the sort of operation that you've dealt with, the depth of that quarry, as well as the location and the surrounding land uses. So I don't want to say that we're going to be complete in another 4 or 6 weeks when it is a much larger and wider issue that I believe that everybody would appreciate that we're trying to deal with.
I just want to assure the Minister that we have great concerns about the challenges in the entire St. James constituency, to which there's more than one representative. The ministry only recently responded to some of the concerns of the residents at Sunset Crest. We put in place a number of culverts in order to open up the drainage systems so we can reduce the flooding in the St. James area. But the reality is it does not stop there. While we do that, we are cognizant that the surface water is now running off faster into the ocean. And the officer been discussing with me and engineers and other persons in environment and other ministries the importance now of putting check dams at certain strategic points across the West Coast. Now, the very water now that we allow to escape the terrestrial space, we now have to turn and put in a mechanism in order to trap that water further inland. So sometimes we try to move forward. We try to address one issue on the landfill. So we now move into the recycling process. The other issue would be we'll keep exploring opportunities, alternative locations, alternative scientific methods that we can apply, even forms of transportation, because in some cases, some of the order that you pick up on the West Coast sometimes don't necessarily come from the landfill, but because of the transporting of the different types of waste along the coastal area, sometimes even the, what do you call that? That's leachate that comes from the trucks and so on, that fluid goes into the street, and for a considerable time you can pick up some very offensive odor coming from those vehicles every day. And that is why the officers get paid for working 24 hours a day. Every day they have to be looking at alternatives and new ways of trying to address some of these concerns. But I am cognizant not only of the residents, but the importance of the West Coast of Barbados to the general economy of Barbados. And I'm going to do everything, Minister, to see if, and I genuinely say it, the two of us must work together, at least to sensitize and to get the response from other members, and then they will have to try to get the response from the financial agencies that will help us to address some of these concerns. So rest assured, I'm not ignoring your concern.
Ma'am, before I go to my third question, I just want to signal to my colleague that the manager of the landfill, who is not within his immediate line of vision, had signaled an interest in speaking. Obviously, I cannot invite her to the microphone, but I just want to draw that to the minister's attention.
Leona?
Leona Deane, SSA again. I just wanted to address some of the concerns that Minister for St. James Central would have addressed with regards to the odors coming from the area, Mangrove Pond area. There are several reasons, again, why there would have been odors in the past. Between the period of 2008, well, I would say about 2010 or so, to 2018, the landfill did not have any equipment. The equipment necessary is a dozer and a compactor. I would have mentioned, I think, in previous occasions, that compaction is necessary to cut down on odor. Compaction consolidates the waste and prevents the infiltration of oxygen, which will cause smells to emanate. Without compaction over a number of years, we made a number of pleas to have a compactor, but we never had, for a long period, we did not have a compactor. There was one that was working, it was down, and it was not repaired for reasons unknown to me. But nevertheless, we continued renting, and the dozers we were renting were actually not what was required or not configured for landfill operations. There was also a period where we were not getting cover material because construction, the generation of cover material is largely dependent on the activities in the construction sector, and the industry was in significant decline, and so therefore the access to cover material, towards 2015, 2016, particularly with the introduction of the tipping fee, was spotty at best. So with the lack of equipment at that time and the lack of access to cover material, what we employed was a method of spraying the landfill with odor control, which we had to rent an agricultural tractor in order to do that. More recently, we have acquired an agricultural tractor of our own. We have odor control. We have the equipment. We have the cover material. We have embarked on a program with BAMC where we acquire ash from Port Vale. The ash is carbon-based. As I said, there's a number of issues that cause odor. One of the other issues is the generation of offal. Not all of the smells come from the landfill. People actually bring putrefied offal to the landfill, offal that they might have had over a number of days, chicken guts, fish, bovine, pork, pig guts, that kind of stuff. And it is actually already disintegrating or decomposing. They do not treat it. We have actually sent letters to all the offal haulers on several occasions. Sometimes when people are in Arch Hall, they think they're smelling the landfill and there are trucks on the highway that are hauling this stuff uncovered and in a very disgusting and smelly manner. And so when it gets up the hill, that smell comes down. In addition, the transfer station has had some issues over past little while because of the fire. There has been a number of complaints leveled against the landfill that actually were not the landfill at the time, where they would have smelled the continuous burning from the original fire, and also sometimes they have issues with their compost area. So there are a number of inputs that may cause odor, but it is not necessarily exclusively the landfill. We check every day. We actually have a supervisor that lives in Arch Hall, so he will tell us whether or not there's an issue, and we do everything in our power. The ash we make sure that everything is covered down, but there are other external or extenuating factors that we don't have direct control over, but we've basically tried to clamp down, particularly on the offal haulers, and given them a certain time to get into the landfill so we can control and cover off the offal hole prior to a certain time in the morning. We don't leave it open any longer. that has come with a lot of backlash where people want to haul off on the road all kind of day and stuff, but we have clamped down on it a lot. So we're hoping that these things significantly improve, you know, any of the odors from the landfill side. But as I said, it's not the landfill alone.
Thank you.
Ma'am, my final question for the minister is perhaps on a easier batting wicket. We have made the point, Minister, that, you know, Barbados obviously has fantastic beaches, and in our manifesto we had committed to the development of niche markets in tourism and new opportunities for Barbadians to compete and attract international and regional involvement in a variety of beach-related sports. Right now on the island, there are some folks here who are preparing or training for the Pan American Games. It was drawn to my attention yesterday afternoon that the beach at Accra, where they were at the time, did not have the beach facilities open after 5 p.m. And that, truth to tell, is a fairly common occurrence in several beaches around the island. From a position of where I sit in the Ministry of Tourism, where we are trying to create new events and attractions in a way that is, and form a synergy with the minister responsible for culture and sports, in order to create space for recreational and sporting facilities on the beaches and to create an interest in that. And the truth of the matter is, it is something that has started to get a measure of success and traction. We've had beach wrestling in Barbados, for example, in the constituency of Christchurch East, and that went very well. But what we need to hear from your side, Minister, is a little bit of an explanation as to where your ministry sees the management of the beaches and the management of the facilities being able to be re-envisioned in such a way as to be complementary to the efforts that are being made to make sure that the beaches in Barbados can, even after 5 o'clock, be places which are conducive to sporting activities and people training for sporting activities, as opposed to the way in which they are now managed.
Thanks, Minister. The difference in the approaches, there are a number of traditionalists believe that we should continue to work the way we're accustomed working, doing things the way we're accustomed doing. And when we break away sometimes from doing those things, they always put up some level of resistance. But what I can assure you is that it is our position that we recognize the importance of having the washrooms open late on evenings, and we have already probably we're taking a gradualist approach to resolving those problems. We've been working closely with in Hastings, the restaurant owners were complaining, saying that at the head time when they want to, not the restaurants, the kiosks and the vendors on the beaches were saying that the head time when they're facing competition from some of the other bigger commercial enterprises in the area, is the very time that they don't have proper washroom facilities, and therefore people are a bit reluctant to go there, because sometimes when people want to liberate themselves from the forces of nature, they have to go underneath the tree or even go to the back of the same restaurant and liberate themselves in that kind of environment. And what Mr. has decided is, defecate sometimes too. What Mr. Al has done is, Mr. Al has given, huh? Right, we have given, and I gave the permission for that. I spoke to the chair as well, and we allow a responsible person. We can't give the keys to everybody. The workers, we can't employ workers for 24 hours a day, but we give the keys to a responsible businessman in that area. He's responsible for the washroom facilities, and he's also expected, if he wants to keep the keys, he's expected on mornings to return those facilities in good, acceptable order to the NCC workers where they come there. So we have done it already at Hastings. We're now having discussions. I think you have done that as well. This Worthings, close to Shefet. There were persons out there who, on occasions, will call and say, "This is what is happening." I've had some guests here, some tourists, and that the tourists were, when they asked for the washroom facilities and discover that there were none, they leave the business place. So, as long as we didn't make it a public announcement, but we've been, as we find the reliable persons that we can vest the authority in their hands to open and close the toilet facilities, that is the best that we can do at present. So, Minister, I'm quite willing to respond to any concerns, and the department is quite willing to respond to those concerns. Just give us the name, recommend the person, and we will just talk to them, and they'll be given the keys to take care of the facilities in the specific areas.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to commend Minister Prescod and his team, the Honourable Member and his team, from the bottom of my heart. For 5 years in the Senate, I shadowed the Ministry of the Environment, and the tasks that the Honourable Member inherited and was faced with, I don't think anybody envied him when he was assigned the portfolio of Minister of Environment. It was a difficult task. We know the difficulties that he came in facing. We met, in addition to those difficulties, resource difficulties that made it difficult to solve in one go the challenges facing the Sanitation Service Authority and his ministry in general. A massive part of our campaign going into the election was on the fact that Barbados was entirely overgrown. The garbage was not being collected, and Barbados was stink. We got to a point now where we can see the old Barbados coming back. The visual difference is easily apparent and exceedingly obvious. A blind man on a galloping horse facing backwards could see the difference in Barbados. The mounds of garbage are gone. Barbados, on the most part, is looking trim, and his members of his ministry are out in full force all the time trying to keep Barbados a certain way. So I must commend him for that. He took some heat while we were trying to get things together to get the trucks and to put things in place. He took some heat. So equally, he must be commended for the obvious difference that his stewardship and leadership has made to the appearance and the smell of Barbados. For another entirely self-serving reason, I wish to commend him as well. I don't even know where my ministry ends and the Ministry of the Environment begins, because we work so closely with each other. We work closely with each other on the South Coast. We work with each other in relation to Graham Hall. Half of his team that is sitting there attend weekly meetings with me on a Monday morning dealing with the South Coast and the Bridgetown sewage. The bulk of our plans for sewage and water involve the Ministry of the Environment. So he calls my officers and gets their cooperation even without my consent, and I do the exact same thing. This is the perfect example of the one government concept. So I wish to thank him for his ease of doing business that allows me to easily do my business and allows us both to look good. Having said all of that, sorry, the last thing I wish to say in that vein is that I heard the honourable member who just spoke and his concerns about the facilities and the access of facilities. And I must say, it simply requires a phone call. My experience has been that it simply requires a phone call or message. Mr. Alves is very, very cooperative. Most of the members are very cooperative. We have a very good working relationship with the NCC down Silver Sands. The Silver Sands beach, the facilities down there, which I would dare say are among the cleanest in the whole of Barbados. So on that score, I say it has become a lot easier to get things done through the Ministry of the Environment and in particular with the NCC. Now, am I taking off that admiration hat and putting on my Minister of Energy hat? With respect to the Botanical Gardens, the Botanical Gardens is massive. I don't know exactly how much acreage you occupy. You must be aware that under the last government, there was an intention to turn the entire botanical space that is now the Botanical Gardens into a solar farm. I'm very glad that was not done. Having said that, there are areas in the Botanical Gardens, particularly I believe to the north, where the soil might not be as conducive to the horticultural exploits that you have in the rest of the Botanical Gardens. And I think that some of that land can actually still be put in to use for renewable energy. It would set a perfect example if the Botanical Gardens, which is above the Bell Aquifer, was to be powered entirely from renewable energy. If your ministry could see towards allocating a couple acres that we can put down some solar panels or some other renewable clean energy installation that would power the entire Botanical Gardens and the NCC headquarters, and then allow the investor, I'm thinking now of the Barbados Water Authority, to get their return from the feed-in tariff. It's a mutually beneficial exercise. And I think going forward, with all of the NCC installations, where you have big installations that might be conducive for some aspect of renewable energy, I would like you to talk to us so that we can ease your electricity bill and still collect something on the back end in terms of the feed-in tariff. So it sets a good example that the Ministry of the Environment is pushing to make itself self-sufficient in electricity and to generate its electricity from clean sources. So I would like you to look at that. I would welcome the opportunity to sit with those members of your team who are in charge. I took the liberty of speaking to Mr. Ricardo Marshall in this respect before, and also your PS. But I would like us to actually further this conversation seriously, because to get to 2030, fossil fuel-free Barbados or carbon neutrality by 2030, in addition to planting trees, which you seem to have covered, we also have to enhance the RE aspect of our generation capacity in terms of energy. So I look forward to working with you in the way that we have harmoniously so far to actually push this agenda, which may be beneficial, which will be beneficial to both of our ministries.
Thank you, Minister. Obviously it is on the table for consideration, but in recent times we took a master plan of the spatial delineations in the gardens, and what exactly we would do with every spot. And that it is 254 acres of land. I will also tell you that we have plans ahead of constructing a geriatric hospital on the eastern side of the land that we are now developing. I don't know the exact size of the land space there, but looking at it, it looks as though it's equally as large as the one that we already occupy. It probably would be very good if we can have that form of alternative energy to use in the gardens to supply the required electricity to the new geriatric hospital there. Probably that is news to some people as well. But certainly, it's a positive response from me, but I have to discuss the matter with other persons at the highest level of government. My officers would not be able to say yes to that either. And as long as they approve it, you at least you have one person that will give you full support on support of having the kind of solar system functioning within the botanical gardens. But I wouldn't like you to have to put it on the parts of land that we already made all plans to go ahead and develop. I would hope that, in fact, before we leave here this evening, while we dealt with a lot of different issues related to the Ministry of the Environment, I don't think this evening I should close without at least giving somebody the future plans and the progress that we intend to make within the next 6 months or so at the Botanical Gardens. So if there are no more questions in relation to that, I would like to ask the Chair to permit an officer to come forward and to speak on the development of the Botanical Gardens as we go forward.
Honourable member, you have before.
Yeah, but, the person can come while I speak. I would just like, Minister, there's a synergy, there's an obvious synergy and relationship between the environment and energy, renewable energy and climate change. So in addition to the Botanical Gardens, which is just the obvious one because of the amount of land space that you have, I just would ask that going forward, every development plan that the Ministry of the Environment has for green spaces, that some attention is given and some consideration is given to the employment or the deployment of renewable energy to power those spaces. Let us use your ministry along with my ministry to actually set the example for the rest of Barbados. That's all I ask.
The response is in the affirmative. Minister, we worked together without any challenge. Very early when you were experiencing the sewage on the streets, the sewage that run people off the main roads, Oystins, Worthings, all along there. Many times when the vehicles pass through Hastings, Worthings, and go all as far as Oystins, they took that kind of matter all up to Oystins, Worthings, Hastings, up to Oystins, St. Lawrence Gap. You smell that offensive odor all there. The Ministry of the Environment was there with you. We were there with you when you had the challenges at the sewage plant, because when this government came into office, I don't even think we were fully aware, even during the election campaign, of the challenges that we were going to face. When we went to the city, we had one unit at the city plant that was not functioning at all, and the other one was malfunctioning. And a Sunday morning while I was eating my breakfast, you called and tell me, come here now. After 3 years being in hospital, is the first time I was able to climb so high in order to look into one of those units. And that unit had a tree that was very matured, as though this tree was there probably for nearly 10 years, and nobody paid any attention to it. We worked from then. We worked on the Graham Halls swamp. My officers still work in relation to Mr. Headley for the EPD every week or so. He is at the South Coast, or he's at the West Coast, testing the water to ensure that the water is not contaminated in any way. The ministry also keeps a closely monitor the Graham Hall Sanctuary. So we worked together for 2 years and addressing things of that nature. And I don't see why we would not address something that is more futuristic. And hopefully we will never see that storage again. But I'm quite willing to work with you and to at least help you to achieve the objective that you set about to achieve. So thank you very much for leading the conversation in that direction. I would now like to ask Mr. Jones to speak on the Botanical Gardens, and I would also like to follow up that by asking Ms. Dr. Brathwaite also to say a few words as well on this issue.
Once again, good evening. I thought I had said enough this morning, but clearly I have to speak again. And I just want to quickly say a few things with respect to achievements at the Botanical Gardens. we were able to complete the master plan, which went before the cabinet last Thursday, and it's my understanding that has been approved. And simultaneously, and sequentially, what we have done, we have created or developed the Waterford Boulevard. We are continuing our strategic land clearance strategies, in the sense that we're not just pushing bush, but we are actually identifying trees of historic and other significance. We are on the road of rehabilitating the road and path network that would not conflict with master plan. And of course, that speaks to health and wellness, because so many people now are occupying the gardens sometimes, and it's open space, so I can't do anything about it. There are too many people doing evenings now. We have also identified an area in the gully ecosystem where we would actually look at the carbon sequestration plot in terms of, I mentioned earlier this morning, in terms of measuring height and diameter increment and basal area of plants, and of course the soft tissue too, which should be the actual plant phenology will guide us as to how we will proceed in terms of the actual collecting mechanism. But there's a standard formula set up for that. We will continue the public education program. I just want to mention that the trust itself, the Botanic Garden Trust itself, the Garden Trust, that has already been submitted to Cabinet on Thursday at the presentation. And I believe that the Cabinet is perusing that, and they will come back to us and say whether or not what amendments will have to be made to that. And of course, we are continuing our program, the cooperation, the technical cooperation programs with the potential funding programs with Jeff and other international agencies. What I would also say at this point in time is that, saying the Cabinet has given the green light to continue or to pursue the amphitheater, we are now in the process of trying to make all possible arrangements to carry that process forward, which would include having the drawings done, the bill of quantities, and having the tender process in progress. Okay? And just to speak to what Minister Abram was saying, I believe that all of us know, I mentioned to you earlier how carbon sequestration takes place generally, because that's primary. I can't go into secondary thoughts now, because some things may need, I may confuse people and myself too. So what I would say is that the program that Minister Abrams outlined complements our program in the sense that you have to move the carbon from the atmosphere, and that's not the only greenhouse gas, because you have things like methane. Water vapor is also a very dangerous gas too, and Minister want me to go into some details. But the point is here at this point in time, this juncture, we have to try to extract as much carbon as we can from the atmosphere, and if we can do it via trees, if we can have solar, these clean energy systems that Minister Abrams is speaking about, this would be important. But bear in mind too that it's not only atmospheric carbon that is causing this problem. Solid carbon is responsible for a lot of this, and this speaks now to how the Detroit bars work. I mean, like how
Mr. Jones, I love your speech, but you're going right over my head. So if we could condense it a little bit, that'd be nice. In normal terms.
Well, Well, let me surrender.
Speak to me like a 2-year-old, in other words.
No, but no, okay, we have to sequester both atmospheric carbon and soil carbon, which would of course build plant biomass, both, okay? The below ground biomass is more than the above ground biomass. In other, the roots are more. So they would consume and store more carbon. So the tree, I'm trying to help you to understand me. Anyway, we are trying to help the environmental process. Thank you.
Great, that sounds good.
Sorry with that.
That's it from you? No, you wanted to invite Dr. Brathwaite as well.
Yes, that's Dr. Brathwaite.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam President. Good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon, all. I just wanted to mention that the Botanic Gardens is very rapidly becoming a site for international diplomacy. In recent times, we have had the President of Kenya, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, the Minister of Agriculture of Suriname, plant trees in the garden. And every event of this nature is underlined by the idea that the trees that they plant strengthens our collaboration with countries outside of Barbados. And as the trees grow, we believe, and we've indicated in our discussions, that we hope the relationship will grow. So the tree has become a symbol of strengthening diplomatic relations. And the idea is to have a place in the garden to expand these possibilities, and for visiting dignitaries to have a space in the garden to express their commitment and collaboration with us in this regard. We've also seen offers of seeds and plants from other countries since the garden has been established. We're currently discussing with 2 countries who offered to assist us in offering exotic plants that don't necessarily exist in Barbados and varieties of plants to us, and also the sharing of experiences in tree planting, what has been their experiences in this regard. And so, with time, the garden can become a place not only for the expansion of our species, a place for the preservation of our biodiversity, where we can maintain evidence of the plants that we know, but also a place for international cooperation, a place for the sharing of experiences with other countries and sharing germplasm and plants that they have that could contribute to our general flora and in this country. In that regard, the Botanic Gardens, therefore, is an important place for us, not only as a place of peace, beauty, but also a place for strengthening diplomatic relations.
I also want to add, Chairman, some people might see the removal of the trees, especially in the boulevard, as a form of deforestation. The reality is that we remove trees that we consider to be alien invasive species. That's the term that is normally used. Predators in the whole environment itself. And you would notice that we remove the river ptarmigan from in the gardens, because if you look at the river ptarmigan, you will recognize that very few forms of vegetation grow close or anyway in close proximity to the river ptarmigan trees. So you see the clearance down there. Some people say, well, why are you removing trees at a time when you're saying how important trees are to the environment itself? But those trees are replaced with trees that have some immediate utility value to the environment that we are clearing. I also like to let the public know, and this chairman know as well, that we are moving swiftly on the, as soon as the architecture work is completed. Mr. Devenish can probably say a few words on this. The architecture work is completed, and that is post the approval, which we got the approval for the master plan about 2 weeks ago. The architectural work for the amphitheater will now go before the town planning eventually. We are going to put in the infrastructure as required for amphitheater. We are going to try to do all of that so that this year, hopefully for the Crop Over Festival, we could do as we did last year, not on the same location, but we're moving more towards the northern side of the location which we kept the event last year, and we obviously be increasing the capacity in that area. That is a very beautiful site. The areas of it that like to be surrounded by ponds and so on. It's going to be a completely different setting, and I'm sure that the Barbadian public will respond to it in a very favorable way. Apart from obviously infrastructural work with large crowds, we have to put in place the required washroom facilities, strategic areas, especially if the crowds are extremely large. Firm decisions will be made on what type of facilities we put in there. There will also be commercial units for vendors and so on at different strategic points inside that area. We are going to not only spend money in the development of the gardens, but what we are witnessing at present is a heavy response to the offer of the services that we have there at the gardens, the facilities. Apart from Crop Over last year, we had a lot of cultural events, a lot of sporting events on Saturdays and sometimes on Sunday afternoons. There are lots of young people and senior persons coming to the gardens. So the potential is there, and I believe that eventually gardening will pay for itself. Now, the garden, very shortly, a paper will be taken to Cabinet, a draft document in the formation of a trust, which the trust will be the unit that will continue to finance the services in the gardens. We'll be doing some restructuring because we don't want to be in a position where we have about 3 different entities all working together with 3 different pieces of legislation. One legislation addressing the botanical gardens, the other one addressing the legal status of the NCC and what the NCC can do, and then you have another one addressing the trust. So we're going to try to rationalize that as we go forward. They will give me a major reform, not just between those 3 different units within the ministry, but a general overhaul of the general form of reformation within the entire ministry itself. So we're working. I think that fortunately for us, whether it's obtrusive or unobtrusive, people can at least have the required information and see in some cases the required information to clearly indicate that the ministry is making progress and that this will be a major asset to the people of Barbados. They will witness that in the very near future.
Thank you, Honourable. Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Honourable members of. I want to commend the Honourable Minister and his team and the Sanitation Authority for the bold steps of pursuing the purchase of trucks to help to ease the problem we have been faced with for a while in the collection of refuse. My biggest concern, and I am not sure if it has been raised before, but when it comes to the parish of St. Thomas, we are really given a very raw deal not so much with sanitation, because at that point in time, when we had a shortage of trucks to do the collection, we really could not blame anybody but the past administration that did not do anything to make the bad situation better. But I recognize that despite the serious efforts that the Sanitation Authority has been making to clean up the gullies, the water courses, the plantation, open lands, and so over the past few months, every time you go back, next day or two, garbage is put back there again. And therefore, it creates quite some nuisances, especially the dead animals, the refrigerators, and other heavy, bulky materials that are just dropped along the road. And of course, just week before the last, there was a big load delivered by a truck. It could not be a car truck that put it out, right in the area of Canefield, close to where people live. And I want to find out if there's anywhere that the Sanitation Authority has given thought to putting up some cameras in those hotspot areas, because all along Vaucluse, Canefield, Content, all those areas are strewn with garbage every time, and it really is a terrible, terrible travesty. The other thing that has me most concerned is the road that leaves from the dump or the mangrove landfill, let me call it by the correct expression, if you're going in, I would call a southerly direction, coming from where they are depositing, to put you onto Box and then onto Highway to where just below the Bagatelle Great House. That is no longer a road because persons are just dumping inside of the road itself. And Sanitation Services Authority is trying to clean up and trying to burn, but then they're going right back and doing it again every day. And I'm wondering if a chain couldn't be put there in the evening. And to be able to stop people from doing it during late hours of the evening and in the early hours of the morning. And it says to me that some Barbadians just do not care whether they impact on anybody or not. And it is not ordinary folk or poor people who are doing it. It is those men and women, or women drive trucks too, who get funds to be able to deliver whatever the refuse is to the landfill, that they're making shortcuts all the time. And it is really having a serious impact on us when you see the television sets and the other forms of equipment that will go into the water course, and then whatever elements are in them, it filters into the system, and it will impact on everybody else's health. So I would like to know if there's any plan for the future for the Sanitation Services Authority to put in some cameras to be able to get the footage. And there are times where they know there's legislation in place. Sometimes I see and I call to say what the number of the trucks are and so on and so forth, but there's no response to be able to have that person or that perpetrator brought to justice. So I would like to indicate that I'm extremely upset that St. Thomas seems to be the major dumping ground in Barbados for everybody else. And I really would like it stopped. I don't know what other plans we can put in place as a people to be able to say to individuals, you're taking your garbage and your dead animals from your own home, and you're polluting somebody else's environment as though you really don't care. At the end of the day, St. Thomas has so many places of interest where tourists and locals traverse the communities. And when they see that kind of image, they will want to know, well, what kind of well-educated people are we who boast of free education and a high level of literacy, and we're not thinking of the sad situation that we're leaving behind for others to have to experience. And I have two other questions, ma'am, that I would like to make a comment on. Thank you.
Good evening. Janice Jones, Manager Sanitation Service Authority. With respect to the matter of illegal dumping, the Sanitation Service Authority really doesn't have any legislation with respect to dealing with that. The legislation falls under the Ministry of Health, under the Health Services Act. The Sanitation Service Authority has no provision in terms of dealing with the illegal dumping. We have been working closely with the Ministry of Health because they are the ones who have the public health and the environmental health officers whose responsibility it is to ensure and to go around Barbados to seek out the illegal dumps. What the authority has been doing Once it's been brought to our attention, we will go and clean it up. And as soon as we clean it, within a couple of days, people are dumping again. The solution for that is rest with strong legislation and people being hauled before the law courts. Until that is done, Barbadians will continue to dump indiscriminately.
Yes, ma'am. The other query I would want to make is in relation to, if we are talking about developing generational links in our society, and our adults are continuing to do negative things to impact on the environment in the way that it is going on now, I would like to find out what are the synergies with the Ministry of Education and other learning institutions with the Sanitation Services Authority to be able to sensitize children even more, and parents as well, so that they get a better understanding as to what is going on with the illegal dumping, as well as encouraging them to work their own little garden beds and to do the mulching and whatever else happens with the skins from your vegetables, and so that the children can do that, coupled with how they will separate their garbage. And I would like to know what kinds of arrangements are being made, because I think it is critical now for our young people to be able to get a better opportunity.
Minister, we've had shared the experience of going to a school in your constituency, which is a great example of the educational program. I think that because of limited personnel, we've not been able to do it universally, from north to south, east to west. But we've been discussing in recent times starting a competition among the schools in Barbados, especially primary schools. And I could, in fact, let me let the officer at least speak to it with great authority.
Good evening, Thora Lord, Waste Management Coordinator at the Project Management Coordination Unit. At the Project Management Coordination Unit, we're responsible for the education and public awareness of all Barbadians, including the school children. We have programs where we go into the schools, we speak to the children, we tell them the importance of proper solid waste management. And when we get there, we realize that the curriculum is doing exactly what it needs to do. When I speak to the children already know that they're supposed to put the garbage in the right place, which is the bin. Now I'm trying to change that thinking somewhat to tell them that there's another way. You know that you're not supposed to dump it and litter it, that's fine. But we're also opening to avenues of recycling. What we had done at the Project Management Coordination Unit is that we've been working with all primary schools. There are about 5 that we haven't gone into as yet. We've put recycle bins in these schools, and we've told the children what they need to do. And we've spoken to the children in the presence of the teachers. And what we like to stress is that it is a school program. It's not a children's program. And what the children can do, and the teachers, and all staff at the school, is bring their recyclables from home to the school. What happens is that they're stored there. They're supposed to come clean though, washed and dried and clean, placed in the bins, and then the waste broker comes there and collects them. And as I said, it is not a student program, it is a school program. So all the adults at the school are also supposed to be involved. And it is hoped that once we have left, we don't have officers there to speak to the children day to day, but hopefully the teachers will remind them. Maybe at assembly on a morning, you'll be reminded, did you bring your things? Did you wash them? Did you put them in the bins as you're supposed to? And then what the school is supposed to do is to liaise with the waste broker, and they come and collect. If there is a problem, if there's some sort of breakdown, then they're free to call us again. What we also wanted to do to put some push onto it to get them more interested, because there's some schools that are very, very good, and there's some schools that are not. Some are trying. And what we have thought to do at the unit is to have a competition where we would tell the children, bring your stuff, and what we would do is to give a prize to the school that does the most separation. One thing that I have been doing as a part of that is to try to encourage corporate Barbados to come and help us in terms of prices. We realize that the government cannot supply everything. We will go with the education, we have the program, but we need persons to come and help us when it comes to the prices. Anybody listening, you could call me at 535-4883 if you're interested in helping us in that way. And we really want to get this recycling off the ground. It's not like we're not trying. There are basically 2 officers. We've gone to all the primary schools. There are lots of primary schools out there, private and public, and we would like to get it off the ground. Well, not off the ground, that aspect off the ground, but just give it a little more mileage than what it had in the past.
So when you say bring the recyclables from home,
Yes.
if I pack my dog with a big bag of bottles,
Yep.
she
I
can
did
bring
it
it
to
to
mine.
school.
Mm-hmm.
She can bring it to school.
What school?
Well, you have, where she goes, you have containers. I know this for sure.
Is that St. Mark's?
Yes, it is.
Yes. I remember your comment
Right,
last
but
year.
if I have a whole set in my garage, I can send them to school?
Yes, you can.
Really? Thank you.
And the school, yes. I don't like to advertise that though. The school then will call the waste broker and they will come and collect. As I said, if there is a problem, if communication has broken down in any way, you can call me and I will try then at the project unit and I will then liaise with them and get you going again.
Ma'am, could I have your number again?
535-4883.
535-4883.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That's it?
Go ahead.
Query. We all know St. Philip is you, ma'am. St. Thomas was targeted with Cave Hill. And that is one of the worst experiences I believe this country would have been faced with all the confusion and the whole conundrum of Cave Hill. And I believe, yes, we need to get the waste to energy projects going and so on. But I'm moving from Cave Hill and going straight to that 6-story building that is built in a construction zone that nobody has gone into it to say, let us be business people. It is built near the biggest quarry you can have in Barbados. It is near Scrapman. It is near the Mangrove landfill, because I was told, and I never lived anywhere else, that that is a general construction zone. And then we saw a 6-story building sprout out in that general area. This is now going on almost 4 years, ma'am, and not a fella has occupied it, because I understand that it is not completed. I would like the Honourable Minister and his team, to explain to us exactly what is happening there, because if workers from the Sanitation Authority were expected to go there to work, and the place has challenges, as most places will if they're not properly clean, and we have sinus problems and asthma, so I don't expect workers to go into it. I would like to get a current detail as to where we are at now. And if there is skullduggery in here, I would like the Honourable Minister to please source whatever information he can, if he can, to let the people of Barbados know the taxpayers must not be fleeced anymore, as I saw and I heard of matters in the last administration, that last decade. And so if the minister can help us to say where we are at with this 6-story building, what are the plans for the future? I know government pays large amounts of money for rentals of other people's facilities to the tune of millions of dollars. I want to know, ma'am, through you, ma'am, what is the status of the building that is at Vaucluse in the parish of St. Thomas?
Minister, as Minister of the Environment, I did all that I can to to make sure I have concrete evidence to move beyond accusations or even prima facie cases before the court. As I was trying to see if I can reach the level where I can at least bring it to the status of a felony. I unearthed what documents were available I had a lot of I had a lot of messages coming in my ears, and in many cases, nobody was prepared to put their hands to a pen and put a signature to the things that they said. So I wasn't in any position, but I have no doubt that there's reason for a suspect. I cannot tell you, and Ms. Jones is in a better position to tell you the cost of that building. When I first visited the building with the staff, it is supposed to be 4 floors with a ground floor. What we call the middle floor was incomplete with raw cement. The sides were unpainted, the roof. There was no electricity. There was no signs of plumbing. It was one large open space with not even a pillar, like the ones that we are observing here. So there was no pillars, anything like that. When I asked why, they told me that initially the discussions was about 4 floors, and then a suggestion was made that it should go to 5 floors, and then the justification for the 5th floor was that they would be able to bring in some extra revenue from that floor to help offset costs. I heard so much different forms of narratives. Many lines of poetry was coming to me from persons who were very, very concerned about what is going on there. Since then, I visited the building again. We initially were thinking about if it was possible for us. The way how the structure is a strange building. I think that if the electricity is off one day, it is equivalent to what you would get at the Purity Bakery to bake bread. In there the heat would be extremely intensive in there, might even cause internal combustion. When I went there on the last occasion, I started to see in the roof and under the covers in the recreation section, I started to see a lot of what they call that fungus. There's a lot of mold in that section of it. We had interest in order to take the burden off the state. We were engaged in discussions with other persons with the understanding that they would either complete what had to be completed or they would take over the building on some leasehold arrangement. I have not had any word in recent times on that arrangement as well. I'm now thinking of how I can salvage all that has been put there and at least put it to some useful purpose. So I am discussing these matters with the sanitation, the chairman, the board, and I'm also trying to put putting the matter before the cabinet of Barbados on what is the next step that ought to be made. I believe that we can probably occupy 2 of the floors and work, but then I have to also, and you can see how my senior officer is looking at me, and I believe the expression which she has will show you there's a challenge here. It is very difficult for me to ask the workers to go in there unless I could give absolute assurance that there's no harm that likely to be done. I am responsible for the Ministry of the Environment. I have a department called the EPD. The EPD is responsible for testing indoor air quality, not only the water in the South Coast and on the West Coast, but they also test the ventilation within these buildings and to see a building before it's even born can be condemned as a sick building. So, Minister, is a matter that is unsolved. What I can ask the senior officer to tell us approximately what is the value of that building, what sort of money, and other things of that nature. Well, the investigation is beyond me, and it looks as though the investigation is beyond the Barbados Police Force. So the reality is that we might have to look for international support so that we can get to the root of some of these issues. We have indicated to the general public, and what we said to the general public was the truth. But sometimes we know, you know that people did something, all sense of reason tells you, yes, this is the culprit, but you're not in a position to go any further than that, because the information, the evidence that is available is not solid enough. And the government don't want to be in a position that if we move and we find ourselves not being able to follow through successfully, that on top of all that we know and we believe, then we have to top up the rewards of that unwholesome behavior that led the person to be standing in the dock and then walking out with a result of not being guilty, when all the entire world believe that he's equivalent to Satan. So that's where we are at present.
The building, the admin building as it is called, was a public sector, private sector partnership. It's a bolt arrangement, and the cost was 28 million Barbados dollars. It's 5 floors, glass, the windows cannot be opened, and there are some floors where there are no windows, so it's an environmental challenge. I visited that building last year, and I just went in through the door, and the time I came out, I had no voice. I was sneezing, and I just visited for 10 minutes. It's a very environmental hazard. Hazard, yeah. The floors have carpet tiles, so they have to be removed before anybody can go in. And as Minister said, there's an unfinished floor. So once that floor is being completed, officers cannot be in the building because it's all air conditioned, so all of the concrete sinks, the dust and everything will come down, and the windows can't be opened on the occupant. So that is it.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas, you're done? You finished? You have any more? Of course. Kerry.
I am satisfied from the responses that have been given, and in the interest of not detaining these honorable members and these distinguished members of staff from the Sanitation Service Authority. I would rather not go any further, because I had really succinctly prepared those 3 in the interest of time and so on and so forth.
Honourable Member for St. James Central, are you interested in speaking still?
I beg your pardon, ma'am. No, that's line to the window.
Madam Chair,
Sure.
based on the reports, Madam, coming from the Met Office, the Met Office indicated to the whole country that this season is likely to be one of the most severe dry seasons in the history of Barbados. I inflate that a little. Obviously, people believe that water is so sacred that trees cannot grow without water. The ministry is exploring avenues to make sure that we can provide water for those trees. I would invite one of the officers to come and speak to how we would use or reuse water in order to continue to irrigate the land space at the Botanical Gardens and in different strategic places across Barbados, because I think that that answer is necessary. And I think that the other thing is how could we have what kind of plants, because based on my discussions as a neophyte with the officers within the ministry, Mr. Jones and Dr. Braffett and others, and Mr. Marshall, they told me that there are plants that they are tolerant to climate of that nature, and they will give us some idea what type of plants, if we are in a dry season, that we can plant in the gardens in the interim period until we get out of this state, and approximately how long the dry season is expected to continue.
Mr. Jones?
Once again, I'm here, ma'am. And I'm going to be as simple as I can. But what we intend to do is to continue the planning program as mandated by the government. What we're going to be doing in this current dry spell is planting drought-tolerant plants, what are called xerophytes, and plants that can, as long as the root system ramifies, establish, and that would be defined or be characterized by vegetative growth, like leaves. So if you get early leaves, then you know the roots would have already been established. And we have seen that in St. Lucie. We have had a very low mortality rate in St. Lucie so far, because we know what we are doing. And the program will progress by planting along the coastal habitats, littoral areas, so that we can't follow the regular parish-to-parish program, but we will continue the planting in areas where, and with plants, so we know where to place the plants, where we're placing them, and how they develop within the soil body. Because each plant would require, for survival, I want to make it something called a fungi, called a mycorrhizae, to expand the root system. And as long as we can do that, we can continue planning the program. So we are not stopping at this point in time. We are short in funds, more or less, and other resources. But I just want to say that the planning program, not only at Botanic Gardens, but across the entire Barbados, will continue, and we will continue to build capacity in our nurseries. We are using, as I said before, we are using, we are looking at this planning program for longevity. So what we're going to be doing is using seed plants, seedlings, because they have a mother and a father. Their seedlings are not plants. And that allows the plant to be more resistant, because it has all 46, and you're a medical practitioner, all 46 genes. So, and I don't want to go into details again for you to tell me that you don't understand what I'm saying. But we are, as I said, we are pursuing the program, and we are doing everything possible. Even though we are using cuttings, and we're using other forms of clones in the program, our primary focus will be on using seedlings for longevity and resistance and resilience as we go along, because we expect these plants to be here for several hundred years, and to address the issue of carbon sequestration and other issues that we anticipate. Now, for quick production, we will be using some form of clones, like cuttings. But just remember, a cutting or a clone maintains the same physiological age as the parent. So if the parent that you take that plant from is 200 years old, is 200 years too. So if any parent already dead, they're dead too. Okay? So we are conscious of what we are doing, and we will continue to follow what is necessary to ensure that this whole planting program, the whole botanical program, and the entire island-wide program becomes a success. So I don't want to I don't want to say anything more that may cause discomfort. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Madam Chair, I would probably, with your approval, I would probably try to wrap up.
And before you do, I cannot leave this chair unless I answer something I just got. I'm asking you to be reminded of the possibility of renaming the Three Houses Park after Miss Florence Dash. That's all.
Madam Chair, I give you the assurance, and my word is my bond. I will never misrepresent my commitment. I told you that.
Yes, you did.
And trust me, the appropriate time. You know, timing is very important.
That's
I
all
think
right too.
we need to have some discussion on that, and give me the rich history of the personality that you want to put on the park, the name on the park. And I'm quite willing to cooperate in any way that I can to make sure you are well comfortable
Happy, yeah.
as you look to the future.
Thank you very much. You may give your wrap-up.
You want? Minister?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast wants to say.
If I may, Honourable Minister, I wouldn't, it would be remiss of me if I allowed you to leave this chamber this afternoon without just a few brief comments. I want to first of all commend you as well as your team for the work that we have seen done since you have taken office. On behalf of certainly the constituents of St. Michael Southeast, it certainly blesses my heart to see the transformation that has started to take place across the community. One former member said that the place was stink. I would have to say Barbados generally, and certainly St. Michael Southeast, was nasty, as Bajans would say. And in the last few weeks and months, we have seen a transformation across the country, community by community, of the efforts being made by ordinary Barbadians in various communities to be able to clean particular spaces that had that over the years had been allowed to just run into disarray. And for that, I really want to say thank you to you and certainly to the wider government for that initiative. I think we all recognize as a cabinet the trajectory on which we were on. And as a tourist destination, but also first and foremost being proud lovers of Barbados, I think it was important that we sent the message that we needed to reclaim this country and that what we were seeing could not continue. However, one of my concerns, however, is that while we are engaging persons in communities to be able to clear bush, there has to be a plan or a coordinated effort to also plant the trees in collaboration with the Regathering 1 Million Trees exercise. And I would want that or hope that apart from cleaning, that effort is perhaps accelerated with the appropriate technical expertise in terms of what types of trees should be being planted. Because I think while we appreciate that if there are more resources, we will no doubt have more persons being able to be engaged. Equally, I think we have to make the most of the persons that we have presently engaged and be able to roll out in a systematic way the planting of trees while those persons are on the job. So I wouldn't want that the program came, for instance, to an end in March, and we haven't started the process of clearing and planting as well. So that's the first thing. In terms of preventative maintenance, and for me in the Ministry of Education, that is always the buzzword. I think it applies to several other ministries, and I would hope that In these estimates, account has also been taken of preventative maintenance programs across communities as well. There's no point clearing an area and then waiting, 3 months later, you're going to see the overgrowth of bush yet again. So just as we are having to do in the Ministry of Education, I think that that is the direction that all ministries must go, and certainly your ministry is no exception. We have worked closely together in relation to our schools, because while your focus may predominantly have been on more the communities, really I think we've come to realize in the last few months that the communities really also include our school environment, and that we have a responsibility to incorporate a comprehensive cleaning program around the school community as well, because there's a direct impact on community and student life as well. And I would hope that going forward that preventative maintenance program would take into account areas, for instance, where there is coverage, which we know pretty much where the areas are, but with a coordinated effort with the Ministry of Education and certainly Ministry of Health, that we would see a more intense program where we don't wait until things happen, but together we're able to identify those trouble spots and certainly put the necessary mechanisms in place. I know that you have had some challenges with landowners who have allowed the properties to be overgrown with bush, because it's not always government that is responsible for the leaving lands to just be abandoned and to have the overgrowth of bush and in turn the rodents. But I think that there needs to be more aggression in terms of going after landowners who have allowed their lands to basically become overgrown with the bush, in order to prevent, obviously, in my situation in particular, having to close schools because there are rodents on the perimeter of school premises. We spend a lot on education, and I think that when we fail to do one thing in one area, it has a direct impact on the education system. So if we can address those concerns, I know certainly that we would be able to deal with the issue of constant closures in relation to rodent infestation. And therefore, if we can have that preventative type of maintenance program in place, particularly in areas that surround communities, but also that surround schools, I think that would help. And just finally, the other issue for me would be the issue of persons who are spray painting, persons who are even allowing fumes from the smoke, because there are a lot of people who are burning stuff in communities. We've had a number of closures as a result of fires in communities, persons burning stuff or just burning fields. And I think, as the Honourable Member for St. Thomas indicated earlier, we may need to move to a system not just of surveillance by cameras, but perhaps some kind of hotline where persons can call in anonymously and indicate to the ministry what is happening in various communities. And then perhaps, yes, we will tighten the legislation, but I think the first point of reference must be that people must feel comfortable that they can, just as they do with the police, that they can contact the department with a view to indicating that they are aware of illegal dumping, or they're aware of persons who are engaging in these types of activities. Because it does cost us substantial sums of monies to close businesses, to close schools on a weekly and a monthly basis. And I think the approach, the coordinated approach of ministries is now needed more than ever. So I would want that you would take into account a number of those initiatives in the hope that we can basically close the gap on a lot of the illegal dumping and a lot of the closures that we're seeing across the school system.
Thank you, Minister Bradshaw, Minister of Education. The Minister of Education, spiritually, you know that there's an inseparable bond that exists between East and Southeast. Lots of Southeast. No. So, there is a, I glance at Animal Farm, and some people are more equal than some. And in this regard, I say that about Southeast because Southeast helped shape me. I spent a lot of my life in in Southeast. I have many friends in Southeast. That's a side. That's a side of the distraction. So Southeast is special to me. I treat Southeast probably because we rub shoulders. We're not even divided by any large space between us. We have a small piece of land in the point. That part of that land is in east. The other part of it is in southeast. The borders are between. You're on the left. I'm on the left. You're on the right. As we come up the Pine East West Road, we do it on the highway as well. And we do it in Hackett Hall borders. So cousins, aunts, uncles, overlapping social relationships exist. Boyhood days, days of adolescence, there's a lot of interaction and a lot of reproduction that probably exists between the two districts. So there's no way that I would separate my ties from Southeast. And you know, Minister, whenever you call, I try to get over to Southeast and work along with you, walk through the community, and we talk with the people in the community. I have very, very good friends out there, as I indicated to you. We are not going to let you down. So that you can count on me. The courage problem which you have at the schools there is a major issue. That in itself is an alien invasive species. The courage itself, very much like the river ptarmigan that we have to deal with. And one of the problems that we face sometimes is how to get rid of the courage. And lots of heads put bandied around how we would deal with it. Because you move it from one district, clean off the surface of the land. You have to take off some of the soil sometimes. The fire services say burning it is saying that burning it is not the best thing to do. That the nature of the seeds is such that when you burn the courage, as soon as everything is settled, the courage comes back up on the same location again. And so we have to be scraping off the topsoil on a regular basis. What we've been doing in recent times is opening up a cavity in the land and putting the courage in it. But then again, we're still moving off the topsoil. It is true. One of my officers indicated just now, and I remember the leader of the opposition asked the question relevant to another issue, but not having the direct legal instrument to assert ourselves in the way that we would like to, when the school makes a request, or even the community makes a request for the assistance from the Ministry of the Environment, we then have to make contact with the Ministry of Health before we can take action. Some people are fully aware of it, especially in the communities. So you don't have muscle, so nobody don't have to have any fear. But we will continue to work with you in terms of cleaning up the schools when it's necessary. We would call the Ministry of Health to come in and identify what it is we have to do, and as long as you can assist us sometimes in covering the costs. Because the problem with it sometimes is that when we hear about these things, sometimes it's a Friday evening, and the workers already work 5 days in a week. And then I have to ask workers to come in at the 11th hour. And sometimes when you clean the courage, sometimes you have the wind coming from the east and blowing the courage inside of the school, so then you have to go through another exercise where you have to carry out industrial cleaning on the school plant itself. And you still have to have enough time for the chemicals to settle down inside the interior of the school. So all of those are issues that we have to address. And sometimes having discussions about these things, persons who never had a practical experience to apply these concerns, they are of the opinion it's a simple job. That's the main issue there, but we are quite willing to work along with you as my parliamentary colleague, as the minister responsible for education. We work along with you to try to see how we can eradicate the problems related to coach. I don't know if there's any other preventive maintenance in relation to trees. No, what? Yeah. Well, it's about manpower. We inherit such a major problem that up to now we cannot complete all that we found. We're moving through every little area across urban and rural Barbados trying to remove waste with the staff which we have. After you remove the waste, green waste, you have to get it carried away. By the time you finish there now, I don't know if there's a special time in history again, but when you look back, you see grass growing again. So what we would like to put a preventative program in place. We'll try as much as possible to see how we can get that done. But it is about manpower versus 24 hours a day at time. But we'll try and do our best for you. One of the issues of I don't know if there's anybody else, but one of the issues that I think that we ought to deal with as well is we're now discussing it, so I don't want to say that we have already arrived at a decision on it, but we're looking, especially in the botanical gardens and in some of the other locations, to see how we can reuse water, wastewater, how we can reuse wastewater. The reality is that all water is reused water. While some of us have the psychological comforts of water being fresh, realists, you don't even have to be no scientist, but realists know that this thing about water being fresh is just a fantasy. Water goes through the system, especially in a country that's full of porous soil. And we know that water goes into the aquifer and the water comes back up again. And you drink the water and you urinate and you do other things, and the water go back into the wells, back down inside the aquifer and it comes round again. So that's one of the most realistic forms of recycling that exists in Barbados. But we can put it to use without causing any major reduction in the availability of water. And we can irrigate the plants in the botanical garden and in some of the other areas. We wouldn't use the water that has been purified, which is what we call potable water. We're not going to use that. But wastewater, we're looking at wastewater coming from laundries, looking at wastewater, not wastewater in the circumstances, but rainwater coming from the roofs of buildings, and see if we can trap the water into tanks. In relation to the botanical gardens, the ideas are still being shared among those with the authority to make a reasonable assessment on if we are on the right track or not. Those are the people with the background in the science, environmental science, and other scientists. We're looking at running lines from places like Commonmere, running lines from the National Stadium, running lines from the NCC, and probably my layman view is putting that water into some tanking system, catching the water at a specific point, and that water can be used then to water the plants in the gardens during the interim period, and we can continue even beyond that. If we can apply that kind of methodology or mechanism in the arrangement for irrigation, I believe that is a proposal worthy of consideration. But I would not really say that is what we are going to do until I have a strong consensus from the persons who will help me to make the final decision, so that we can address the issue of the lack of water. I don't know if the predictions are correct, because while having discussion on this subject on the rain, I had to rush into my bedroom, close down my windows on the eastern side, rain coming down hard. I was just saying that this is a dry season. So I don't know how many times the rain will have to fall in the dry season for it not to be a dry season. I don't want to criticize any site or anything like that, but you know, sometimes we hear today is going to be a nice, warm, and sunny day, and then maybe you look outside, the road flood with water that certainly come from the sea. So we are in a situation like that. The task which we have before us is a challenging one, but I believe that we are quite capable. I can't have this kind of academic talent in the ministry itself, and these scientists at a local level who are academically sound cannot apply the science and helping us to resolve some of the challenges which we have. I believe that the opportunity should be given to them without having to wait on some external expert to come in and talk to them and hear from them what their views are, and then write something down on a book and pass it back to the ministry and tell them this is the expert advice. Sometimes a lot of pirates operate that way. The history is repeated with that kind of arrangement where people carry out strong research and then end up writing a book and putting the names at the bottom, and sometimes they can't remember what it is that they wrote about. And then the state has to place the burden on the taxpayers to try to find $100,000, $200,000 in order to pay this expert who only extract the information from the ordinary people and it's not all, but most of them. So I believe that we can achieve what we want to achieve. I believe that we can find new means, new approaches. I have no doubt. Maybe we're discussing reuse of water. Maybe we're discussing issues in relation to the separation of waste at source. Things that I never thought about. I heard coming from the officers. We talk about how we would, especially the matters related to the Ministry of Energy or Water Resources. We discussed the many different ways that we use piping systems in order to separate water that we use for portable purposes against the use of water for other means, in order to maximize the benefits of the water that is available to us. The ministries, at times we travel onto the coastal areas of Barbados, the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Energy. We travel around the coastal areas to look to see how the surface water is escaping the terrestrial space and going right into the ocean. And obviously, Mr. Marshall and other officers in the ministry, Mr. Headley, different officers come up with different solutions on how we can trap the water and at least have a greater capacity for the storage of the water on land. I don't believe that as a result of storing the water on the surface of the land, that will reduce the intake into the aquifer. I don't believe that. I believe that the aquifer will still get the same amount of water that it's accustomed getting, but what would happen is that most of that water would not go into the ocean. I don't think that we have to bring anybody from anywhere in Alaska. No, I don't think we have to go to Cairo. I don't think we have to go to Fiji. I think that right within the Caribbean, we have competent persons with the ability to come up with these simple solutions to some of the problems which we have. Indigenous people resolve indigenous problems. I think that as long as we have
Honourable
that
Minister, I'll give you one more minute because I take it as your wrap up. I need liberation as well.
You need
liberation, as you said earlier.
Yeah. Well, I am not going to make it an apostrophe. I will put it as a full stop. Madam, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, and I want to thank No, I now recognize that the leader of the opposition would like to, and I would not like to deprive him of the opportunity to speak. So we can, you can suspend things for a while, or ask somebody else to take the chair in your absence.
There is nobody to take the chair in my absence.
Well, we can.
I am scared to take a break and come back.
So you
I would depend on the leader of government business, because we need to move on to the.
I don't want the leader, Madam Chair. I will hope that the leader of government business would be accommodating in the circumstances.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it could be accommodating, because I think that we were quite capable of going straight to 6 o'clock. We are quite capable of going to 6 o'clock, but I am willing to. I'm asking you. It's a form of what do you call it? Litigation. I'm asking you for your mercy in the circumstances.
Madam
The
Chair.
thing is, we have another head coming.
We suspend. We-
I will allow the.
Let
all
the
members
leader of
to
the.
say my
Madam
goodbyes.
Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker progress and ask leave to sit again. I would not want the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to accuse me or this government of denying him or depriving him of the opportunity to so speak. So I think we can take a short adjournment when the Speaker comes. Thank you.
You have a second though? Can I have a second?
Suspended?
No, we want to wrap up this head.
Yeah, but, okay, so what are you going to put the question?
Yeah, she had asked for me to report to the Speaker, so it was then on the second. We still have to start Kurt. Kurt still has to
Yeah,
come
but we
on.
haven't finished this yet.
That's what she's planning to do now.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, you know. The chairman of committees has reported progress and request leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 5:30 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended until 5:30 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 5:30.